Hello, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ian Lawless, I'm Content and Conference Director here at Procurement Leaders. I'm delighted to be with you. Today's webinar, we are going to be looking at discussing seeking stability in an uncertain world and how we can create a playbook for 2023 and beyond. So some context to set the scene from my perspective, and there's some pretty extraordinary challenges that we're all facing and that businesses are facing today due to the unique demands that have been created by the current environment that we're engaged with for procurement organisations. And our procurement leaders really do need today to address that huge range of concurrent challenges that include rising inflation, increased supplier risk, market volatility, and evolving environmental and sustainability expectations, amongst others. So I am delighted to say that I'm joined today by Shareen Gongulur, Vice President of Software Sales at GEP, GEP, who are partnering with us on this particular webinar. Shareen, lovely to have you with us today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Ian. Lovely to be here, and thanks for having me.
No, pleasure. We had the pleasure actually meeting a couple of weeks ago back at the APAC Congress as well, where you kindly presented to our audience there with a great session as well. So looking forward to similar insights from you across the course of the next 40 minutes or so today. But before I hand over to Shareen, just a couple of pieces from me on the interactivity of this webinar, as with all of our procurement leaders webinars. Excuse me. If you want to submit any questions to Shareen throughout, and some of you already have, thank you in advance of this session today, please do put those in the Q&A section on the platform, and we'll be looking to run through those towards the end of the time we have together after Shareen's presentation. Any additional resources, GEP has a wealth of thought leadership that they're able to provide on a variety of different topics that were available in the additional resources section, and also linked to Procurement Leaders Marketplace as well, where you can find a lot more on there as on a variety of different topics. So please do visit that as well for some further reading around a lot of challenging and thought-provoking topics today. Let us know your feedback, always really important for our improvement of any of these types of sessions here at Procurement Leaders, and fill out that survey question at the end. And any technical difficulties, check out that help section, and one of our team will be really happy to help and to ensure that you have an enjoyable experience with us over the course of the next 45 minutes or so today. So I'm going to hand over to Shareen now. Shareen, we've got an awful lot that we can cover in here, given the challenges I mentioned there at the top of the discussion. I think I'll hand over to you. This is a really pragmatic approach and practical next half an hour that the audience is going to get from you on thinking about that playbook for 2023 beyond, and how we can really provide some stability for our organisation. So over to you, sir.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for the introduction and the context. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. The intent here is to share the insights that we are, from our perspective, based on the client interactions that we are having and the environment that we are looking at. And we felt over the last 3 or 4 years, the context and the uncertainty that has kicked in for many of the organizations, and procurement has been in the center of all of these changes, uncertainty that has kicked in. We felt that moving forward, the context has changed so much, and the way you need to act and react has changed. Hence, probably it's time for the procurement and the supply chain professionals to start putting a new playbook together. And with that view, this session has been created. So with that, I'll move in and start giving you more details on this. So let's take the overall macroeconomic trends. So there are 2 or 3 things that are kicking in and are happening as we speak. One is interest rates have been increasing, and that is because all the central governments are working hard to take control of the inflation. And every central government has decided that they are going to be quite firm and do whatever it takes to bring the inflation down. So those interest rate hikes that we see, whether they're going to be at a faster rate, slower rate, increased basis points, reduced basis points, are all intended to curb the inflation. Now, when we are having that interest rate being used to stop the inflation, which is a good thing, what is then happening is that is kind of going in and affecting the economies. So if you look at it, I think when you're looking at 2023, 2024, the GDP overall, they thought it will be 4.5% sometime in end of 2021, move to 2.7% by the time we were middle of this year, and now we are coming to the end of the year and they're saying it's going to be 1.7%. So what you're seeing because of these changes is there is slowdown that is expected, and you can hear it across the news that this is happening. So you have this thing where inflation, which was troubling us the whole of 2022, they're saying we're going to take control. So by Q1 of next year, we will see inflation getting controlled. But then the side effect of it is the slowdown that is going to happen. What does that mean? And then with these two things coming in, then there is a different type of risk that is building up. The different type of risk is the supplier risk. So earlier, if you had supply chain disruption because of the pandemic and then the logistics issues and the inflation because of fuel increases, logistics price increases, today the economies have opened up, the countries have opened up, so you don't see so much of those supply chain bottlenecks that you may have seen in the last 1 year. They have all eased up. But then the risk that is building up is with the slowdown happening, you will have the smaller suppliers will be at risk. These are the ones who kind of get affected quite severely, because once the slowdown happens, it means the investment stop. Investment stop, then whoever is on the smaller side are the ones who can become vulnerable. So these are the things we feel need to be taken into consideration while you are going through and getting beyond 2023. Now, some more context. So we understood the macroeconomic piece, what is happening. What does that mean in terms of the challenges that the procurement professional has to deal with? So if prior to pandemic or during the pandemic years, it was all about business continuity, safety of the employees, and try and get supply continuity going, it became work from home. So you had to establish the collaboration tools and try and make anywhere, anytime, get the work done was the big challenge that you need to address during 2020 to 2021, end of 2021. Then that challenge kind of changed immediately in 2022, and you quickly had to look at inflation hitting you high. How do I manage this inflation? Most of your suppliers or many of your strategic suppliers have been requesting for increase in prices and so on and so forth. And then you still had the Ukraine war coming in, and then the supply chain disruption continued. You have the climate risk still remaining as one of the more important than before. That was the challenge. And now we are moving into a slowdown of the economy. And the challenge now becomes like, if the inflation gets managed and it reduces, and then you have slowdown in economy, then can I go back and get those savings? Is that possible? And if I'm going to become very cautious about my investments, then the focus will be on, can we exercise and focus on maximizing the existing investments and drive more productivity, more value out of it. So those are the things I feel the procurement professionals have to deal with in terms of managing going beyond 2022, 2023, and so on and so forth. So when you look at what has happened for us over the last 3.5 years, is the dynamism with which things are moving has increased tremendously. So 2019, if all of us were thinking, okay, we had a great year and now we are going to see more of growth. And by January, end of January, I think in Asia, we all started feeling the heat of COVID. And by the end of March, the whole world started feeling the effects of it. And then we completely moved into a very different context. And then it became important as you progress through is you needed to have an understanding of your business data, and which is what I call it as internal data. So you need to be on point on all the different things about your business, whether it's got to do with the spend, what categories have become important, who are the suppliers, where are these suppliers are, is there a risk of continuity, and then my buying department who is now going to work from home, how can they still collaborate and get this business done? And all of this you needed to understand from the internal data perspective. But that was not enough. You also needed to understand the external market intelligence, which means where is my supply base? Are there any lockdowns happening? Is there any supply chain disruption, logistics issues that are cropping up there? And will I still have the supply continuity going on? And you needed to understand both of them. And then that is how you understood what the insight is. And with those insights, then you made a more informed decision. And then your practices changed, and that's how you move forward. So this, we feel, has now become a norm. Earlier, if you were a little fuzzy about your internal data and you roughly knew, oh, the business is going to grow 5%, then my strategic materials, I can safely assume this is how the projection is going to be, and I can move forward to make the decision. Those kind of fuzziness and take the decision has changed. So now it has become important that I need to be on point on what the internal information about my business is. And then I need to be on point on how the emerging market outlook is, whether it is on the categories, it is on logistics, it is on supply basis. And then from there, you start taking your decision making and move forward. So this is how I feel going beyond 2023 becomes the norm. Now, the good news is with the hybrid workforce becoming also a norm, now there are a few people coming into office and the few are going to work from home or from wherever, then the way to make all of this happen is to put the whole digital platform around and make this whole new model happen. And this is what we feel is the new way in which you put all of this together and try and address whatever dynamic situations you are coming across and move forward. Now, the digitalization, the important thing is, while all of these things that we were facing, the pandemic and everything else, technology has definitely progressed and improved. So you are seeing much better progress on all the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all the other things like data lakes, big data. These are all have matured, and you have lots of use cases that are deployed successfully, and you see them becoming more and more mainstream. And that is where I feel with the new framework that you have, using digital and putting a platform will actually help you gather up all the information, collaborate across a hybrid environment, and get your decision making and put your new practices together and execute on it. So that's the whole crux of it. This is what we feel should be how you should be putting your playbook in and working through. Now, what I'll do is I'll now give you examples of how this framework works in different contexts. Okay, so let's take the first one. So last couple of weeks back, I presented this whole session in Singapore. And after the session, I did have a few clients who have come back and then said, yes, Shareen, you're telling us in the next 3 to 4 months, things will change. But then I'm still feeling inflation in some of my categories. So what do I need to do? So I just added these 2 slides up front so that to all those procurement teams or organizations where they're still feeling the effects of inflation, the way to deal with, one of the ways in which we have addressed the clients and have been successful is actually to put up inflation and volatility control towers to get a handle on it. And this inflation and volatility control tower, what it does is it takes your spend, and I have given an example here of all of your spend categories, and then what you do is you basically kind of start mapping red, orange, yellow, white. What that means is red is all those where you have really high inflation. In this example, it is like anything more than 20+%, you can categorize or call out those categories as red. And then anything between 10 to 20 orange, and then 3 to 10% yellow, and then 0 to 3% as white. So now you have a complete picture of all of your spend categories as to red, orange, yellow, white. And then from there, you can start focusing on which are the ones where you're having problems, and then start addressing those spend categories properly. So we have seen clients who have been effective is to set up this inflation volatility control towers, and then after that, put together a cross-functional team, and then perform these spend analysis analytics. And from there, you then put your mitigation strategies and work through it. So this is how you can address any inflation that you may be coming across in any of your spend categories. So that's how you do it. So now, once you have this picture and you start addressing the mitigation strategies, these mitigation strategies can be categorized broadly into 3 or 4 buckets. So some can be where you can take some commercial steps and try and address where you can go back to your suppliers and figure out what are the commercial structures that you can do. The other is to look at supply chain and see how you can then change the supply chain from a value chain mapping or nearshoring or whatever different alternatives you have. Or you can go into engineering and see if value engineering teams can help you find alternatives which can then help you alleviate whatever inflation you're doing. Or you can take help of finance and sales team who actually go into Forex or in taking any of the future future positions in certain commodities, which will then help you take those appropriate positions and help you address these things. So this is how you could go about doing mitigation wherever you find inflation as still a problem for some of your spend categories. Now, one of the interesting things that has helped a lot of procurement professionals when it comes to the commercial side, and that is where procurement teams get involved, is what we call it as cost modeling. So we have seen clients coming in and then saying, hey, you know what? We have suppliers coming in asking for 100% increase, 50% increase, 60% increase, 20% increase. And the question for us was, what is the basis in which we can go back and actually have a discussion which is not confrontational, where we don't feel that they are taking us to cleaners and they don't feel that we are really being insensitive to whatever is happening to them. And here, what we have seen is all the category managers had to dwell deeper, and cost modeling helped them actually understand what it is. So what you do is you take your spend categories where you see high inflation, and then you start building cost models where you understand, okay, how much is the material cost of it? How much is the labor cost of it? What is the inflation of it? How much is energy cost? What is the inflation of it? How much is the logistics cost? How much is the inflation of it? So once you have this cost model built, then you have some sense of how this inflation has affected the different elements. And with that information, you can then go in and have a much more informed discussion with the supplier rather than feeling confrontational and getting all salty about the discussions that you're going through it. So we have done something similar to one of our customers. So what we did is we helped them build these cost models, and then using these cost models, then they went into the supplier discussions and then had a much better way in which they went back and forth on what should be an appropriate increase that is possible, and then negotiate that and manage their relationship and their supply chain much better. So that's wherever you're facing inflation and how to go about it. Now let's move to the next thing, which is we are seeing a slowdown, and you move into Q1 of next year, then this slowdown and the effect of inflation being reduced, you will start seeing those changes. So if you look at it, in our opinion, we are coming off a 2-year price cliff. And we are already seeing signs of these prices coming down. So you do see that the fuel prices have come down. And then we are also seeing the logistics prices for many of the different categories of logistics have also come down tremendously. And you will start seeing those effects on all the various other categories that you see as part of CPI coming down. And then the question becomes, what do I need to do? Because with the slowdown happening, the management is going to come back to you and then say, hey, I know last year or even 6 months ago, we had to sit down and negotiate and take these price increases. But now that I'm hearing the inflation is down and we are having a slowdown, what are we doing to actually get those savings back, which will help the business? So that becomes very important. So our request is get ready. By Q1, end of Q1, you will start hearing these things quite regularly in your management meetings. So then it becomes important for us procurement professionals to start proactively taking steps in terms of putting a cost reduction exercises with our suppliers. So it is good to start signaling early with the supplier saying, hey, we are seeing that the outlook is that the inflation is going to come down, but along with it, there is a slowdown expected. So let's get ready. We are going to discuss these costs with you guys and then communicate that and then get down to managing this better. So here, one of the things you will have to do is to again go back to the earlier slide I said, is to go back and look at your spend and then say, okay, where are all the inflation is coming down across various categories? And then what are my sourcing strategies that I'm going to put together and then run those sourcing strategies there. So some of the sourcing strategies could be running discounted renegotiation of contracts where you may get discounts, so bring them in. Sometimes there may be a rate renegotiation may happen, so bring them in. In some cases, you don't have much option but to go ahead and probably actually go to the market and do an entire sourcing there. So those things are important. So get ready by looking at your spend categories and doing that. And here, what we feel is having a digital platform, which I was talking earlier, makes it easier because you can templatize these things and scale it much faster. So I'll give you one example of a digital platform, how it can come together. So here is a typical category dashboard, management dashboard that you have. So this category management dashboard, if you look at on the left-hand side of my screen, you have all those big labels there. So you see, you can have spend overview of that particular category. This is internal information. You can then look at cost drivers that are important from a cost modeling point of view for that category. Then if you go down, you will start seeing what are all the sourcing projects that have been, that you are conducting so far. What are the contracts that are open there for you? So these are all documents. So these are all internal information. And then you look at supplier profile, market insights, news feed. These are all the external information. So you have everything in one place. And then you have a dashboard through which you'll understand what is happening to this category. And then from there, you start putting the strategy for these. So in this spend categories, some of them may be negotiated discounts, some may be contract renegotiation, some may be competitive bidding that you may need to go ahead and do. In some cases, you may have to do some standardization and process efficiency. So this is how you use your category management tool to then establish what should be the various strategies around this category. And then each of these blocks can then become initiatives for you, where you can take this down along with your internal and external data that you have, the market intelligence report, the cost models that you built up, and then take it and then create a project and run these projects. So once you're running these projects, you also have visibility rolling up to the various management teams, but also to the collaboration teams, which may be a cross-functional team who's helping you run this project and make that strategy happen for you in that category. Okay. So from there, if you say, okay, my strategy is to go run sourcing, then automatically those information moves into a sourcing module. You can execute sourcing there. Or if your category strategy says, hey, I need to go renegotiate, then you take that strategy and then you go into your contracts module and get into a renegotiation with the suppliers, and finish off those contract negotiations and capture those details, whether it's on the commercial terms or the legal T's and C's, and put them together in one place. So that's how you kind of start communicating to your suppliers, use your digital tool or platform, and then put your category strategy and then run these end to end, and then track them in terms of how you're progressing through for each of these initiatives. Cool? So that's how you could take control of how to run these cost reduction programs or cost control programs that your management may be seeking. The next thing I was talking about is on the suppliers. So earlier, if your supplier risk management was all about which country are they in, are there any lockdowns happening, or are there any logistics issues happening from their port, if that was your main metric or focus with which you are checking your supply chain risk, moving forward with the slowdown happening, the metric and the perspective changes. So the perspective will be more about what is the financial stability of that supplier, what is the exposure of that they have from their debts or anything like that, because that is a possible way in which they may fail. So you again will have to take a look at your internal data, which is what is your supply base, and then maybe also take some of the critical or strategic suppliers. You may go into N tiers, which is level 1, level 2, level 3. In some cases, they said they have to go to level 4. So go to the level 4 and start checking the financial metrics and how leverage your supplier is. And that gives you a picture of what you need to do from a risk point of view. And then you add the external data, which is the news feeds, the financial credit rating pieces, and all of that coming in. And you match that with the supply base that you have. And from there, you can start taking some proactive measures in terms of where there is a possible supplier failure happening, and what are the alternates and different mitigativeness that you can do to make sure that you don't have the supply chain disruptions from financial issues that the supply base can face. Cool. Now let's move on and talk about climate risks and sustainability. So this is my last topic. Now, one of the important things to take note of is we are moving into a slowdown kind of situation. So get ready. Your management may be a little more careful and cautious about new investments going into sustainability. But we feel that that's a short-term thing. So once the business cycle starts picking up, then I guess the investments and the focus will improve dramatically. And this is where you need to probably use this next 12 to 18 months to actually set up your infrastructure required to run this sustainability in a bigger way. And the most important thing we feel is to actually have a framework. And when you look at this framework, essentially you take your sustainability and then you say, okay, there are 3 pillars in which you can address your sustainability. One is around net zero, and what should be your focus on net zero. The other could be around social, what is important from a social point of view for your corporation, and do that. And the other is the circularity. So like, I'll give you an example. In social, we were working with one of the MNCs in China. And they said from a sustainability point of view, they were looking at more and more less privileged suppliers to be part of their supply chain. And they were trying to kind of look for women-owned supply base as part of trying to help address the social cause that they believed in. So then you had taken that as an initiative, and then you're building a program around that whole piece. Then we do have a lot of clients who are looking at net zero as the most important thing that they need to work towards. And when you are looking at net zero, one of the things that has come out is scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emissions is something you are directly influence it, and therefore you have a way to calculate it and get hold of it. It is the scope 3 emissions, which is based on supply chain or your supply chain, is where it becomes complicated and trickier. And here, the way we have been helping clients is, again, to look at your categories, spend categories, and then from these, then you look at what are the emission factors. So you're mapping the emission factors for each of these spend categories. And what you have is you then come and create a map of your categories where you know which one is red, which one is yellow, which one is orange, which one is light green and green. And that then gives you a perspective as to where you need to go focus to drive the net zero conversations that you need to drive. So that is how you can move in and do it. Now here, one of the interesting things is these spend categories, you can then map it to the suppliers too. And then you can have a supplier-based picture of this red, orange, yellow kind of thing. And once you identified that, then you can go and put some specific strategies or specific programs for each of these suppliers and make it happen. So here, once you identified your categories and then the suppliers who are there, then you start these discussions. This is not something that's going to happen overnight that you say, hey, we need to change the emissions and the supplier is going to agree. So this is going to be a long-term program. So you'll have to sit down and then try and find out whether these suppliers have signed the treaties and the pacts. Then it becomes easier because that means their senior management has agreed that this is an important thing and they're taking steps. Then you try and understand their programs and then work and then start mapping as to how the target bases are going to come down and work through it. And then you will have some suppliers who probably may not be as savvy as that. Then you'll have to sit down with them and have some amount of education session saying, hey, look, I mean, this is something which is important. It is not today it's going to influence you, but maybe in a couple of years it is. So you need to start putting a program together and come back and let me know how this program is so that we can work towards some of the things that we are committing to. So this is how you go ahead and have those conversations and put your sustainability program together. So that's what I have for today. I know I kind of tried to touch almost 4 to 5 topics in a short period of time. I hope it was useful. With that, I'll take a pause and see if there are any questions that I can address.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Shareen. We certainly do have questions. I've been beavering away in the background while you've been talking, just collating a lot of the questions that have come in from the audience to put them into the areas that you've been talking about for us today. So perhaps if we almost going to recap and go back to the start of some of the areas that you've been focusing on, and we go right to the start of the playbook and how we manage inflation and volatility. There's some questions in there that I think will be good for us to address. One of the questions that's come in says, pressure on savings is higher than ever before, but due to everything rising in costs, it's very difficult to meet those goals. So do you have any particular recommendations in how procurement can use quite a seller's market to its advantage?
Yes. So as I said, if there are still certain categories where you feel the inflation pressure, so then one of the things that we have seen from a commercial point of view where procurement can influence is to map the inflation onto your spend category and then take it down to the cost models. And once you have the cost model, then you understand how much is the raw material and what is the inflation impact of that raw material. How much is logistics? What is the inflation? How much is energy? What is the inflation? And so on and so forth. So once you have this detailed cost model, it helps you get a picture of what this is. So it is not so much as savings that you are looking at. Your strategy will be more on cost avoidance and how do you manage this better. If somebody is asking for a higher percentage of increase, then the question is, with the detailed cost model that you built in and the discussions you have, how can you try and keep it together to as much as what your picture is rather than whatever is being asked is how you will measure your effectiveness.
And you touched on raw materials, just kind of briefly in that answer there. A question we've had in specifically, if you could elaborate further on, is how is the trend for raw materials expected to progress in a recessionary phase, and how best would you recommend to our audience that they manage it? Bearing in mind, there's a lot of different industries, different organizations, and the reliance on raw materials is going to have a different context for a lot of our audience today. But any particular thoughts from you there on and some guidance you could give?
Sure. So I think the general outlook is your inflation is going to come down by Q1 of next year. So one of the things we have seen some of the clients for wherever they can is not to take any long-term positions right now, and see if there is something. If there is something that you need to take as a position, then you need to work through what is the forecast looking for Q2 and beyond, and then do that. So we are expecting all these prices to kind of come down. So if that is the case, then if you can postpone it. If there is a way in which you can actually start looking beyond that, then use that, and maybe your finance team and all can help you figure out on if you have to take any future positions, then go ahead and do that. But be mindful that it is coming down. And please don't go ahead and negotiate a long-term contract right now with the rates that you are in.
And if we can follow up thinking about some of the unprecedented nature, as we touched on throughout this, that we're facing from a supply chain perspective, just generally. One of the questions from the audience is, how can procurement strategy be made much more resilient and scalable? I guess when we're talking about that today, I mean, are there any? You've given us a great playbook and an overview for a variety of ways in which we can address some major issues. But are there some quick wins or some areas in which you think building that resilience and that scalability into all of our programs, where there's some areas in which our audience can make quick wins today as well?
I think when you're looking at quick wins, probably one of the things we are seeing is we are seeing customers get ready for trying to go and renegotiate their spend categories. So here it is good if you can clear the decks in terms of trying to scale this. So there will be a lot of spend categories that you may need to go to market. So it will be a great time to go to market. If there are some spend categories where you may have to pay higher, then you need to come back and renegotiate it. So you need to build your templates for these renegotiations. You need to get ready to go to market quickly. Get ready with that. And if you have a digital platform, wonderful with it, because then it becomes easier for you to scale on the number of events that you want to do and get done with. So I'll give you one example. This is London Olympics 2012. So I had a customer who was actually trying to build the games village. And they said, I only have 6 months and I need to run all these contracts for the whole village to be set up. And the way they figured out is by having a digital platform and then having cross-collaboration team and it is visible to the whole management so that they can run through this at scale, made them get this all done in those 6 to 8 months that they need to get done. So we can take something out of that example of saying, hey, if you need to run spend categories, many events, then having a digital platform will help you do that. Put the templates in and you are ready to scale once you see that the downward trend is coming.
Fantastic, thank you. The last, before we move on to the next section, and one of the questions come in, which I guess doesn't quite fit with everything that we're talking about entirely, but I think it's pertinent to ask at this point, because as we're talking about everything that we have to manage, our current and future skill sets of the procurement professional is very important. So the question is, kind of, what do you think are the key current and future skills that a professional in procurement must have now, bearing in mind the amount of volatility and flexibility, I guess, that's required from our professionals to deal with a multitude of different requirements at any given point that change from the external environment, but also from the needs of the business. So any thoughts there from you?
No, I guess the framework now is about plugging in the internal information, which is your business data, and then also keeping tabs on the market data that you have, whether it's market intelligence on your category, supplier intelligence, and so on and so forth. They both need to come together. And then if you can have a digital enabler for you to then do it, because you are in a hybrid work environment, whether you like it or not, that is how it is. So it becomes important for you to scale. Then you're thinking scale, you're thinking digital, you're thinking external data, internal data coming together for me to then have that insight. That becomes the most important way in which you will have to run as a procurement professional, is what I feel.
Thank you for that. And you touched on some of the needs of the digital requirements there as well. So let's move on to another section here with some of the questions that have come in around. And you gave some great examples from a digital platform perspective to help execute along those category strategies. A couple of questions here from the audience as well. What is better, a long-term category management approach, or rather a short-term for the here and the now? Any thoughts there from your perspective?
No, I think when you look at category management, right? Category management is something like a living document, and what happens is it has a life cycle, and you will have a view based on how the market conditions are changing. So you can have a category strategy where if the market says, well, the prices are diving, then absolutely you need to take advantage of it. And then you move forward a few years, and if he says, oh, the prices are going to increase for whatever reasons, then you better figure out what should be your cost avoidance strategies there. So a category management is not like there's a short-term or a long-term. These are all tactics that you will have, that you will be executing from time to time. And you having a view on what is happening outside and what is happening inside will help you then figure out what to be the right tactic for you, is how I see it.
My fault. Not coming off mute there quick enough. Apologies. Thank you for that. I think just carry on the conversation around the digital category strategy complement each other in this respect. The other question that's come in is there's so many sourcing tools out there that work to implement and utilize in building category strategies. Could you give a little insight on prioritizing the tools that would be helpful? Is the most important tool in the procurement playbook? Kind of what is it that's the most important tool in the playbook to help bring that value to the organization?
Yeah. So what we are seeing now is about a category management tool, because these days, if you look at it, I think you have standard source-to-pay platforms everywhere. And then category strategies are happening in documents outside, whether it is your Excel, your PowerPoints, or your Word documents, wherever. They're all getting constructed there. And when they are constructed there, they are actually jumping in and then saying, oh, hey, what is my spend visibility? what is the forecast for this spend? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Then they go out somewhere and then say, okay, what is the market price that are pegged? What are the market indices for it? So you see, you have some information sitting in one place, another information sitting somewhere else, and then you're creating category strategies somewhere in your documents. And after that, you're going to a regular source to pay platform and saying, okay, let's go execute some sourcing, let's go execute some contracts. I feel that has changed. And what you're now looking at is a place where you can have these category management tool in place, allows for connections into the internal data, your business data around your spend, around your contracts, around POs outstanding, and so on and so forth, and then also connects to the external data on your market information, on what's happening, indices, and so on and so forth, which then allows you to construct something quickly. And from there, you are then executing your tactics as and when dynamically things are changing for you. That is where I feel it is moved. And that is the important thing that I feel clients have to start looking out for.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think the last question is in this area is a bit more of a, I guess, is linking kind of the cost conversation with some of the technological aspects that we've spoken about. GEP's always got some very interesting analysis and thoughts when it comes to the use of advanced adopting of technology. How are companies leveraging advanced technologies, machine learning, AI, RPA, etc.? What are you seeing kind of out there that is helping to deliver bottom line cost savings at scale for our organizations in periods like this that can really give them advantage? Absolutely. I think when you are looking at it from a procurement and a spend management perspective, the CFO and the CPO are looking at, hey, how do I drive cost programs, whether it is cost avoidance or cost savings, and then how do I drive process efficiency? And this is where AI and ML are helping run that, because what you want is, while you're having all of this data, and this data is becoming massive. So now you have IT people talking data lakes. So if you have data lakes happening for you, then how are you going to actually process and start having some meaningful insights? This is where AI and ML use cases are helping pull that data up and then saying, okay, here are the things that are happening for you. And then you use that as your information and insight. And from there, it becomes easier for you to make those decisions. So that is how we see the whole source to pay platforms evolving, with category management and AI and ML coming together to drive those cost programs as well as process efficiency programs, which is what the executives are looking for. Fantastic. Thank you for that. And I'm conscious of time that we have with the audience today, but I want to make sure we get some questions in that have come in. And please do keep putting them in for the next kind of 10 minutes so that we have with Shareen today. But if we move on to supplier risk management and the climate risk and sustainability, because a lot of this is interconnected, given kind of the supplier aspects when it comes to our climate risk and sustainability and our mapping of emissions, etc., and working kind of to entities of suppliers to ensure that we have that visibility. One question from the audience: how can procurement be used to accelerate the adoption of product level emissions reporting and data quality without placing undue burdens upon suppliers, especially some of the SMEs? Interesting angle, because it can put a lot of a burden on those that we work with to meet the multinational corporation standards in order to work with them so effectively. So, and any guidance or thoughts from you there? I think the first thing first, if you are looking at the net zero as one of the important things, and this is interesting because you're looking at net zero, but you also want to have social also to be part of that whole discussion. So the first things first would be understand where is the supplier standing from an emission standpoint. So first you take a look at your spend categories, and once you have those red, orange, yellow, white kind of categorization, and then you get into your red, and that is where you probably have to have more focus there, because that's where you see the maximum emissions. Then you map that to the suppliers who are doing that, and then you go into the emissions. And once you have that picture, then from there, having discussion with the specific supplier becomes easier. And in some suppliers, if like you have a social also as part of your priority, then for these SME type of suppliers, I think first having this picture and then going to that supplier and then having that communication started now, so that you give them those 2-3 years to start
ramping up and making those changes necessary becomes the way to go, is how I would suggest. So it's not like you're looking at change immediately for these suppliers. So first, let's identify these suppliers, get them to the table, start having this conversation. And this is a program that you will start putting in for them, where they can have this program of trying to manage this over 2-3 years kind of time frame. And I feel that's the right way in which you can progress this through.
Absolutely. And then when we think about, I guess, the one of the questions that's come in here, I think quite an interesting one, is actually about the balancing act of affordability and sustainability at the moment. There's so much pressure when it comes to, if we think about energy transitions, for example, and going green, a lot of 2023, 25, 2030 targets for organizations, the cost implications of doing that, and then the ethical and the longer term business commitments a lot of organizations have made can sometimes be put into a bit of jeopardy. Any kind of guidance again that you give to the audience about that balancing act of affordability and sustainability?
No, those are the important criteria. I think the affordability, business commitments, ethical, these all become the most important things when you're making these decisions. So these are not easy decisions. So it is not like, okay, I don't like this supplier, I'm going to flip this supplier, is not how this is going to work. This is much more complex, and it is going to take time. I think the most important thing for all of us who are into this is it's a long journey. I think let's prepare for that long journey, and we are going to have multiple discussions and debates on this, and then we will have to figure out a way out of this, rather than a quick solution where, oh, this is not working, I have an alternate for you, and voila, we are done with it. Because when you find an alternate, it may not be cost effective. Then how are we going to manage all of those things becomes important. So it's not a straightforward way in which this is going to happen. So a lot of debates, a lot of discussions, and then you take some deliberate actions to actually get to where we are getting at.
Absolutely. And just an aside, I guess a plug for a piece of work that we've just done with GEP is one of our big picture guides, which provide a lifting up of some of the biggest topics that are currently facing the function and businesses as a whole. We've just completed a guide in collaboration with GEP around sustainability of the future, and kind of what that call to action is for not just our function, but kind of businesses at large, and also from a greater societal environmental perspective. That will be available very, very shortly on our marketplace to view as well, and provides another bit of a deep dive from one of your colleagues, Natalie Henfrey, on there as well, with some really good takeaways. So well worth looking at for our audience to follow up on as well.
Absolutely. Yep. I would encourage all the professionals to look at that. Yes. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yep.
Absolutely. And we're almost at time today, unfortunately. I guess it just takes us to a little bit of. I put these into buckets, these questions, when they came in from the audience, and my last kind of one, which I put under future gazing, just to kind of pick your brain, just kind of quickly, I suppose, from our audience today. And the question that I think we'll look to finish on is main three challenges as you're seeing. You've outlined an awful lot here for us, but maybe the next three challenges that procurement leaders in the next 5 years really should be prepared for. What's that next thing potentially coming around the corner? Is it, for as an example, as one of our audience put in, is it potential China and Taiwan relations deteriorating and potential invasion there, etc., leading to a bigger scale of a crisis similar to the Ukraine war that's going on at the moment? Your thoughts there, kind of anything that the audience should maybe think about in that risk management perspective and their planning going forward scenarios?
Yeah, no, I think when you look at where we are as a overall from a complete global perspective, risks these days can be anything. I know we picked a geopolitical risk, but you can have a natural disaster risk. I mean, our natural disasters have increased, and something happens somewhere, and then the supply chain just falls apart somewhere else. You also have economic cycles being much more rapid, much more connected globally. So you have geopolitical risk, you have natural disaster kind of risk, you have economic cycle risk. These are all risks right now completely there. And the way to go about is to actually put a framework through which it will allow you to manage from a dynamic point of view rather than a static. So internal information, external information coming together for you on a digital platform, allow you to then access this anywhere, anytime, which becomes an insight, and then you use that insight to then change your model or your practices so that you address the situation that you're confronting is the way to go, is how I would suggest.
Fantastic. I think we are at time really for our conversation today. Really enjoyed the opportunity to well, firstly for you to position an awful lot of thought leadership from your perspective and GEP's perspective on how best our community can really tackle 2023 and kind of get a bit of a headway in some very difficult challenges. So we really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through that today. So yeah, leaves me just to say a huge thank you to Shareen and to all of you for joining us. Greatly appreciated for GEP for working with us on this webinar today. As I did mention as well, there's some additional resources there that please do take a look at. There's a variety of things you can take a look through that I think on the back of this conversation will be very pertinent. I mentioned the big picture guide that we've recently released on sustainability in the future. We also partnered with GEP on our Compass report, which is a guide of CPOs thinking and bearings as to what they're going to be dealing with from a strategic level, from a board level, going into 2023 as well. Well worth a look on there with some of the key priorities that our audience should be really engaged with for next year. And do take a look as well for upcoming webinars in our calendar kind of across the board with procurement leaders as we close out and help to prepare for the start of next year as well. But a huge thank you, Shareen. Again, really lovely to have the opportunity to spend the last hour with you or so. And yeah, very much hope we can have the opportunity to talk to the community again at large with some more of your insights. But thank you for being here today.
Thank you too. Thank you for having me, and thanks everyone. I hope this session was useful. If you have any questions, look forward to getting them and we can answer it. Thank you very much and have a good day. Cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye for now.